Our guest in the chair today is Roger Gomm. Roger is an associate lecturer here at the EPC, and he retired from Metropolitan Police Service in 2012 after 34 years. In that time, he held various senior roles in policing. He policed everything from protests and sporting events, including the Olympics, President Obama's visit, and the London bombings, the 7/7 bombings. More recently, he was involved in looking at and reviewing what happened in the London riots of August 2011. Roger, thanks ever so much for joining me. You're here at the EPC doing a talk called The Importance of Situational Awareness. Now, for the uninitiated, what is situational awareness?
This is quite simply knowing what's going on around you. And I sort of insist that it's so important for commanders at all levels, really, gold, silver and bronze, to understand the situation from the wider perspective, look at the bigger picture. Operationally, they talk about things like methane, which is a scene assessment, which is fine at the scene. But when you get to probably the silver level and the gold level, it is very important that they understand the wider perspective. And what I talk about is, so the incident happens, whatever it is, we've got an incident, and we presume we understand. Now, training, experience comes into that picture. But what we need them to do is to move into understanding the situation. And that takes a little bit of an analysis, and I'll come back to that if I may in a second. But once they've done that analysis and started to understand, they can project future impacts. And it's at that stage we can happily say they're ready to make some decisions, to set an aim and objectives for the operation. What is often the case is incident happens, right, okay, I know what this is, we'll get these, we need to do this and this, and we'll get a strategy without the analysis. Now, that's fine, but by doing the analysis, you've got that bigger picture. One of the things I like to get people to do is what we call an SDI, which is scale, duration, impact. The scale is what's the geography, well, how big an area has this incident impacted on. Duration, how long is it going to last? Certainly the blue lights will always think response, but actually response is about that long, and recovery goes on and on and on. So I try to say to people, just think this through. So how long is it going to last? So response phase, recovery phase. Some people talk about the acute phase first, which is the similar process. Then the impacts, doing what to whom and where. People is the obvious impact. If you've got fatalities, casualties, are there health issues? But you can break those down and start to get a bit of detail. Transport perhaps, the local economy, environmental impacts, and just start to analyse these. And we use an impact tree in the classroom, and they start to see. Now, one of the benefits of doing that is you've got some working out. You've got some notes made at the time, using a good old-fashioned policing term. But you've got something that you've written up to show why you've written this strategy. So once you've done this analysis, and you can start to project some of the issues. Flooding, for example, if you've lost the power, you've lost the machines at the bank, so people can't get their beer tokens. That's going to have a significant impact on the local residents if they can't use the banking machines out of hours, for example. And there's lots of little issues, just loss of power will present, which can be fed into the strategy. And then, starting to ensure that we really understand at a gold level, and I also think it's useful at a silver level.
It's at that level then, at the bronze level?
Bronze level, they really are focused on delivery, they're focused on a task or a function where they're more concerned with the actual risks in front of them and managing a group of people or some resources to do a task. But it does, if silver has got that shared situational awareness and has the time to share it with the bronze command team or the bronze commanders, very useful document because it helps you to understand the bigger picture. And if you're coming into contact with the community, which is what it's all about really, keeping the public safe, the community safe. If you understand the bigger picture as a bronze commander, you are a better bronze commander because you'll say the right things to the media, you'll say the right things to the community without having to think it through.
Planning is obviously important at any major incident. Then thinking that you're going to say situational awareness needs to be part of that planning then.
Oh, absolutely. It needs to be. It's actually a sort of I suppose, a core function, I might call it. So it's a core function of command. The first thing you do is not leap in and make decisions, but assess the situation, get that understanding. And yes, it needs to be part of that planning process. And it's very much a command function. It doesn't mean that the commander can't have their support staff helping them do it. But it's one of those activities I do find that 2 or 3 people working together, just assessing either the whole or parts of it, works very well.
So part of the planning and also part of the incident once it happens, the situational awareness, step back almost, are you saying?
Yeah, so it's certainly if you think from a strategic perspective, we need people just to think, spend a little bit of time, not take time out because, it's all, strategically they've got a bit of time to think about the incident. It's not so easy at a silver level, a tactical level, but it still doesn't mean it's not possible. But it's just taking a bit of time out. What's the bigger picture here? Have we got all the bases covered? Do we understand? What else should we be thinking about? And it's that little cycle before we start getting into those decisions.
Thinking then about the gold, silver and bronze command, the system, is it a good working system then?
The important thing is it's about having the right people doing the right jobs at the right time. Now, you need to be trained in general terms for gold, for silver, and the bronze key functions. You do need to understand the process of command. You do need to have some very specific training, I think. I mean, a good silver commander has probably been a bronze commander, and they may be able to swap those roles around if the opportunity is there. But of course, when we talk about big incidents, very few people get the opportunity to command at any level in those big incidents. That, the what I would call the direct experience. Most people have to rely on the indirect experience. So I would commend training, exercising, whether it's in a classroom or out at an exercise physically. That's where they're going to get the experience, and test the processes, because it's no good trying to test the process on your first event, which goes difficult.
In the sense you've got that direct and that indirect experience, can the indirect, the training, ever compensate or ever be the same as doing it for real? That's when you must really learn.
Well, I think you do really learn the direct experience, and of course that's the best way, but it can be very expensive. You think, at Hillsborough, the commander in charge, the police commander in charge at Hillsborough was not trained. Had received no training in commanding football events or big sporting events. I struggle with that, but I've spent a lot of time, various training courses, delivering training to commanders who do sporting events, do protests, and it's about bringing them on and making sure they are able to, and they understand what it is they're doing. But I think the indirect experience of training courses, exercising together with the multi-agency, is what makes the commander really understand their role and the roles of their partner agencies.
And what makes a good commander then?
Oh, what makes a good commander? I think it's a number of things. We'd be here for weeks, but it's good leadership, communication skills. It's sometimes you need to be decisive, sometimes it's consensus, it's the ability to adapt to the environment. People often say to me, well, we've got a plan, but I think the key for the commander, a good leader, is to adapt that plan to meet the circumstances. And that, you may have to take advice from others, you may have to listen to others, but you're going to have to make some key decisions. And the more training you've done, the quicker you'll move around that situational awareness cycle, start to see the bigger picture and make good decisions. There's a whole host of things.
So some people might make better commanders than others?
Oh, most definitely. Some people are very good accountants. When the crisis hits, they're not necessarily the best people. If you go into a corporate environment, you often find that the chief exec is marvellous at running the business, but when the crisis hits, not necessarily the best person to have at the head of the crisis team.
One of the crises that you looked at closely was the London riots of 2011. And you looked at the response that happened there and reviewed that. How much learning was there? How much changing in the way policing is done in light of what you looked at particularly?
Back foot, we were caught out, especially on that Saturday. There were a number of events. Perhaps the trigger was the shooting of Mr. Duggan in North London, in Tottenham. He was, a bit of a Robin Hood character in the local community. He was liked, he was known. But then we had a very quiet Friday. Nothing happened on Friday. And I think perhaps we relaxed a little bit more than we should have done. We had some contingency plans in place. And then really, things were very slow to happen on Saturday. But unfortunately, when they did start to happen on Saturday, and throughout Saturday night, I came in from home and lots of my colleagues came in to take command, and we had resources mobilised all across London, but we were playing catch-up. And that's a very difficult thing, as a police officer involved in public order, all my service really, to see us losing or on the back foot was really very difficult. Then, Sunday, when it got quieter on the early hours of Saturday morning, we planned for Sunday, brought in lots of resources, lots of command. We thought we had enough, and then if you looked at where it all broke out in London, we were north, south, east, west, all over the place. And again, we had a strategy of, in simple terms, maintaining the peace, responding to incidents, keeping the public safe, protecting property as far as practicable, and we were failing. And that's really difficult. Then Monday, all bets were off. The whole force was out, resources from outside of London, and again we were on the back foot because of the sheer scale of the criminal activity. So Saturday was rioting in response initially, then it turned into criminal activity. Sunday was criminal activity because they realised that if they spread out, the police couldn't respond. Monday was criminal activity, stupid criminal activity, because a large number of these people were subsequently arrested. But of course, reputation for London, public confidence in the policing, public confidence to go about their business, it had a significant impact. So it was, then of course, later, also some of the cities on Monday, Manchester and I think Liverpool, Nottingham and a few others also had some disorder. Birmingham had some disorders and some sad deaths. So it spread around the country, and actually to see that, and it was criminal. It wasn't protest. It wasn't, it was stealing. These people wanted to take what they wanted from shops, and they saw the opportunity and did it. And that was almost a breakdown in society, which was the troubling thing, and the difficulty we had in responding in big enough numbers to these various incidents. So personally and professionally, I found that very difficult. I was debriefing and briefing various members of staff that was going about their business, and I think London was shocked. Tim Godwin, the Commissioner at the time, put a lot of effort into mobilising the force, getting resources from around the country, and it was difficult. It was difficult to get a handle on it.
Difficult to get a handle on it, you say. It's interesting because you talked about situational awareness. Was anybody able to step back and have that situational awareness when the riots were ongoing?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, because one of the mistakes that we made is we didn't call out the Resilience Forum. London Resilience Forum, I've worked with London Resilience Forum over 10, 12 years. I knew most of the players well, but I was so head to the grindstone, if you like, focused on sort of resource management. And I know Bob Broadhurst, who was the goal commander for some of it. It's got a lot of work with London Resilience. We just didn't think because we didn't have the time. We were trying to predict, we thought we were doing a good job, certainly on Saturday nights into Sunday. We thought we were able to predict and get the number of resources, but we were caught out again. And again on Monday, we were overwhelmed. So, that situational awareness wasn't what it should have been. Or could have been, and that's that's a sad reflection on us really, and it was really difficult. And when you look at it afterwards, as I got the task with others of reviewing, to think, we should have had an involvement. They got involved, sort of Tuesday, Wednesday, but actually they really should have been part of this earlier on, and to actually realise that we failed there. Was an interesting lesson.
The bigger picture is important.
Oh yes, most definitely. We were galloping to keep up. We were on the back foot. And actually, one of the big lessons, as you probably know, is the social media. We were unable to manage social media. The flow of information on social media. The BlackBerry messaging was being used to organise crime, and we were unable to, first of all, monitor it and actually respond to it. And that was another big lesson for the police service, not just the Metropolitan Police, but the police service and the partners. The scale of the social media.
And do you think those lessons have been learnt now?
The lessons have been learnt to a degree. Social media, as an example, there's lots of analytical tools that you can use to sort of try to predict where people, the activity people are having, and you can plot them. So it helps. But that's just one aspect of managing events. You're dealing with people, you're dealing with their motivation, and the motivation on this occasion was to take what they wanted, and that's a real challenge. London is covered in cameras. Most of these crimes were committed on camera. They were destroying cameras in shops, but they were destroyed. They were filmed destroying the camera, and that film footage is still available. And you just think, is it naivety, or just they think they're going to get away with it? Because you actually feared at one stage that society was breaking down the rule of law. But then, you can sort of step back and, I think it was Clapham Junction where the community turned up to clean Clapham Junction up and actually say, let's just reflect here. This is the community saying, we've had enough of this, we're going to clean up our own high street. And they all turned up with brooms. And actually that was, from that day on, that was the end of any disorder. And of course we started to make arrests early Tuesday morning, started taking people to court overnight. So all those sorts of things, working very closely with the media to get the message across, started to have an impact, and people went, ooh. And it was, there are numerous lessons I could pick up, but I think I'll probably leave it at those.
Lots of lessons to learn.
Oh, there's lots of lessons learned, yeah.
Fascinating, Roger. Thank you for your time.
That's my pleasure.